Alright guys, so I've got a few stainless steel trim pieces here for Steve's car. These are items that are missing. He didn't have them, and I actually had them here from some of my parts, so anyway, I donated them to his car. This is something that doesn't really need to be messed with right now, but I had these in the trunk of his car just laying in the floor back there, and I got back there to finish wiring up the right side tail light and decided I would go ahead and knock these out real quick. I enjoy sanding and polishing stainless trim and stuff because it's so gratifying when it's done, you know. Stark difference from what you start with to what you finish with. So what he was missing is both seat shell for the front bench seat. These go onto the seat shells and they have these little ears on the back here. You always have to, you know, straighten them out to get them off of the shells. And then I always go in and straighten these back out real nice with pliers and stuff. And then I do the sanding and polishing on them. Now these are good pieces. They're not dinged up or anything, I don't think. I've went over them with some 4/0 steel wool dry just to kind of clean them up, get all the haze and the crap off of them, just to get a good look at them to make sure there's no dents or dings or anything in them. But they appear to be fine. So anyway, I've got both of them here. I've already straightened the tabs on these and went over them with steel wool. Although I just seen this, I forgot about this. It's got something gummy on it right here that I need to get some lacquer thinner or acetone and wipe it off of there. And then the other things he's missing are the trim pieces. These are slightly curved trim pieces that go on the rear armrests of a hardtop, and his are missing. And I happen to have these from my car, my hardtop. I didn't put any of my lower stainless on my car. It's a custom. Anyway, these are nice. They're not dented or anything, so none of the stuff is even badly gouged that where it would take a lot of repair to get these out. So stainless trim is not that hard to work if you just take your time, slow down, and pay attention to what you're doing. But it's, for me, the first thing to do is to straighten the tabs out, and I'll show you the tabs on this. See how they're just kind of kinked up a little bit. So I've got some, just some little jeweler's pliers here, and then I've got some flat duckbill style pliers. And I'll just go in there and kind of work on that, try to get them straightened out. Then I'll go to the sanding and polishing process. Now the way I do it, if the parts aren't dented or mega scratched, I'll usually start with 800 grit. Now, what I use on my stainless trim, and this is for all the interior trim and even the exterior trim on the car that's stainless steel. So I've got an air, this is a polisher or a grinder. It's not a DA, it's just a, you know, just orbital is all. Just spins. And I've got a, I think this is a 2.5 inch pad, I can't remember, but I've actually ground it down a little bit. It might have been a 3 and I ground it down. But what I do is I get on eBay, and there's many people on eBay that sell them, but they have groupings of Velcro back DA paper. So what I mean by a grouping is they'll have like 1,200, 1,500, 2,000, and 2,500, and it's a group of like anywhere from 3 to 5 sheets of each in that grouping. So I get those because they're kind of a hodgepodge of brands and stuff, but it's like $10. And what I do is I actually stick the sander to it, and then I'll just take a pair of scissors and I will just cut out my enough to cover that pad like I have here. And I usually get 3 out of each one of these. So to me it's just kind of a cheap way of going. Instead of buying, you know, 3-inch DA paper in all those different grades, this is really the cheapest way to go. Anyway, I start out with 800, and I've got 800 here. That's what I've got on here, a brand new sheet. And there's some of the stuff that is scratched, but it's not gouged. So if you have a gouge, you'll have to work it over a little bit. Now if you have a ding or a dent in stainless, if you have access to the back of it, you can use little bitty pieces of punch or just about anything to get in there on the backside and use light pressure on a hammer and hammer that out. Do not try to knock dents out of stainless steel on a piece of wood. The reason is the wood is soft. You'll lay the trimmed face down on the wood thinking it won't harm the stainless, and when you go to hammer that, it actually puts a higher high spot on the backside. So you do it on steel, like a dolly, or like I use a lot of times the top of my bench vise. There's a flat pad on it. Anyway, I'll work that out, and at that point, after I work the ding out, usually have a little bit of a high spot, not bad, and then I'll go back and just kind of tap on the outside of it with flat hammer a little bit, just lightly. Then you can file it with like files, like fine files. You can get a little small file set from like Harbor Freight and use a file, a fine one. I'm not talking a heavy duty one. And you work that and do an X pattern over where you work that metal, and it will straighten that, flatten that out. And then you have to go through all the grades of DA paper to get it back good. Now I'll go 800 on all these parts, then 1,000, then 12, then 1,500. And I think I'm going to go ahead and go straight to polish after 1,500. Now normally I would go to like 2,000 or 2,500, but these are interior trim pieces that are down low, and these will look amazing even though I stop at 1,500. But now the other thing I do, which I'll show you when I get to that point, when I do the polishing on this, I've got a standard bench grinder, and generally you don't use a high-speed bench grinder with a buffing wheel on it to polish stainless. The reason is it's too fast, and usually when you put your rouge on that wheel, as soon as you hit it there, it's going so fast, so much RPM, that it'll basically bake or cook that rouge to it. So you're supposed to have like a slower turning, lower RPM, but a lot of torque, because if you usually have like a cheap bench grinder that's low speed, as soon as you touch something to it, it'll stop. So you gotta have something with a lot of torque to it. I don't have anything like that. I just have a standard old bench grinder, and it's high RPM. But a lot of people will go through different wheels and different rouges, like grits of rouge. I go straight to green. When you sand them that far, I go straight to green, and usually by the time you get to like 2,000 or 2,500, even 1,500 on stainless trim, that fine grit paper, it almost puts a silky sheen on it. It's almost polished just doing that. So as soon as you touch it to that wheel, it's instant shine. But the worst part about trim is if you don't sand all the scuffs and stuff out of it. Like I've already went over this with the 4/0 steel wool, and you can see right here it's scuffed really, really bad, and it's probably from people getting in and out of the back of the car and shoes scuffing it and stuff. So anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out with 800, and I'll go over all these parts, and then I'll switch to 1,000, then I'll switch to 12, then I'll switch to 1,500. Now after I'm done with this air sander with 1,500, it leaves swirl marks like you would have in paint on a buffer. So what I do at that point is I take a new piece of 1,500 grit paper. I don't use the DA paper, I usually use the square sheets, the wet or dry, and I do it dry one direction. You could do it wet, it's just messy and it gets all over me. It'll make the paper last a little bit longer if you do it with a little bit of soap and water. But anyway, I'll sand these one direction with 1,500 after they're sanded with the 1,500. Then I'll go back and hand do them one direction. And what that does is it gets out the little swirl marks out of it basically. And then you don't have to spend as much time at the buffer trying to polish those swirls out. So the one-way polish usually does the trick. And it's kind of funny, when you buy reproduction stainless trim, the finish quality is terrible. It looks nice, but if you really, really look at it, you'll see like sanding lines and buffing lines and stuff like that. Usually the aftermarket stuff is not very good quality. And people, there's a lot of guys out there, professionals that do this for a living, and when you're done with it, it looks like it was taken to the chromer and chromed. That's how nice it is. you don't really have to go that far with it. Now, when I learned at like 18 years old, a guy took a door spear for one of my 55s at a place I worked at, and it had a dent in it. He's the one that showed me how to get the dents out of stainless and work it and all that stuff. And then he didn't have any rouge, so he just put a cotton buffing wheel on the bench grinder and used Mother's Mag and aluminum polish and put it on the part and hit it with that buffer, and it'll do the same thing. But the green rouge you can get at Harbor Freight. There are better quality ones out there, and I do have a high quality one that I bought, but it's almost gone. So anyway, I'm going to get started on this, and I'm not going to go through here and show you every single step of grades of paper because the video will end up being 2 hours long. People are just going to skip through anyway, so I'll kind of give you the rundown of how I do this. And if the air compressor kicks on, there is nothing I can do about it. You're just going to have to live with it. I have to have the compressor to build air to be able to do this stuff. I think I already straightened. Nope, neither one of those are straightened yet. Anyway, all I'm doing right now is just straightening these tabs out. Anyway, I'm going to straighten these tabs up, and then, actually I've already done this one. So I'll show you on this one. So anyway, that 800 on there, it really just kind of, it makes it look pretty bad. Like the 4/0 steel wool had it looking better. But what this is going to do is get all the light scratches out of it. Because I want this to look like a mirror when I'm done and not a mirror with scratches in it. So anyway, I'm going to go at this, straighten them tabs out, work all the stuff with 800, then I'll cut out some 1000, then I'll cut out some 1200, then 1500. And then once I get to that point, I'll show you on the camera what the 1500 looks like when it's done, and then I'll set up the tripod at the buffer and show you how to buff. All right, I got all the parts sanded. So I went all the way to 1500. Normally I go higher, but I think this will be just fine. And then I took some 1500 and I did it straight, like sanded one direction this way. And it's basically just to get all the swirl marks out of it from that sander I used. But anyway, one of these does have a few little pock marks in it, but it's just fine. It'll still look pretty nice. So the first thing I'm going to do is clean this because it just sets here. I've got an old headlight ring here. This is stainless steel, and it's got all these little sharp edges, and I've used this so much these sharp edges aren't really sharp anymore. And then I split it with a pair of tin snips and peeled up these corners to use these edges here to clean this wheel with. I don't use a rake. I just use this because it's free. One thing that I learned on polishing stainless steel is you don't want to use a screwdriver that's steel, because the steel will contaminate the buffing pad, and then when you go to try to get a mirror polish out of stainless, that contaminated wheel, it'll never get a super good shine to it. It'll look dull and scuffed. So if you're going to polish stainless steel, clean your buffing wheel with stainless steel. Here we go. Just using green rouge for stainless. All right, so here is the final on these things. There might be a few fingerprints on them from me handling them, but they look really nice. So there's the two for the rear armrests, and here's the two for the front seat shells. But they turned out really nice. I'm pretty happy with it. They're not perfection, but they look pretty nice for, you know, a couple hours worth of work, and it shows. It's good results, you know what I mean? That'll work. I think you'll be happy with it, because I am. Thanks for watching.